humanitarian crises caused by armed conflict, then, I mean, I think, and this is why I would actually, I put it this way, there may be reasons in the Security Council that Sudan and DRC are very much on the front burner of the agenda and could come up, several times a month, and Sri Lanka is not. That's why I would say, in a perfect world, the NGO community should kind of like hit them where they ain't. Do you know what I mean? Like underreported and unacted on humanitarian crises, I would say. I mean,
but then you kind of get almost like a chicken and egg scenario, right? Like a lot of times the NGO communities is the only game in town, right? And they're the ones that bring to light, terrible things going on in Darfur. It was sort of the NGO community at first, and because they had sort of an active presence in South Sudan that brought to light and advocated for Darfur.
Oh, no, absolutely, and I give them a lot of credit for that. That's probably one of the only thing is that I think there reaches a point where once you have, like, it's ironic to me when you have the engine of U.S. foreign policy and the NGO community moving in the same direction. Like, personally, I think I would be then the NGO community not should abandon what they've been working on, right? But I hate to say it, like somebody, I don't, and I understand this. I think the difference of opinion is like this is not true for any particular group. They're free to focus where they want, right? But I think that either as a journalist or whatever, you could step back and say, wait a second, all the NGOs are like, they're all on Darfur. Look at this other thing. So it's not, the only way to bring that up is to say, hey, enough project or whatever. Why? Well, I mean, okay, I'll jump to another topic, not another topic, but you'll see what I mean. As you may have seen, this is a kind of a hype one, but George Clooney, right? George Clooney was traveling in Chad, and there was this op-ed by Nick Kristof where he said the UN had called him up and withdrawn the security. Nick Kristof wrote, speculating that this was because they thought that George Clooney was going to say something, sort of politically incorrect, or if in terms of timing, about President Bashir and the indictment, right? Yeah. That was his article. Now the UN, not only did they sort of publicly, although very gently, right, because George Clooney is an ambassador of peace for peacekeeping, goodwill ambassador with this focus on peacekeeping. But also, like Nick Kristof, I know for a fact that like the people at the 38th floor of the UN met for half an hour the day the article came out about this article, sort of, and there was a lot of grumbling about that it wasn't fair. It seemed kind of vindictive on Nick Kristof's part to like focus on this one call, and they basically denied that the UN had ever provided any security to the Clooney trip. And to make a long story short, I ran into Sudan's ambassador, which, you're free to discount anything he says. But one thing he did say, which I think is probably true, is that they turned down a visa for George Clooney to Sudan. That's true.
Not surprising.
And that the UN's head of Department of Field Support, Susanna Malcora, told Sudan that Clooney's trip was not on behalf of the UN whatsoever. And so the UN's position, I don't even know where I'm going with that, except to say I guess in part I'm also like I totally like. Once again, sorry about this. It's been kind of a long week. The connector with this was that.
I see the light bulb.
Yeah, no, I actually have a light bulb today. Hopefully it'll look better. But as to Clooney, this is what the ambassador of Sudan said. He said, "Where are these people during Gaza?" And I thought it was okay. It's a kind of a snarky G77, Islamic comment. But you know what? It's kind of true. Like in terms of like.
What do you mean? There was so much outcry over Gaza.
But are you saying no? That's why I'm throwing it out to you.
Whole sessions talking about.
No. I'm not putting. I'm saying I think this was his comment specifically as to George Clooney, and I'm certainly not trying to say that it's not a self-serving comment, but it's one that I'll say it had a little bit of traction here. But I would go further, because I will say with that, I think that the problem in Gaza wasn't a lack of media coverage. Do you know what I mean? Or a lack of Security Council meetings, because there were many Security Council meetings and there was extensive media coverage, right? Even with Israel blocking coverage, Al Jazeera was there, footage came out.
Right.
Then because of this last, like whatever it's been now, a month, looking at Sri Lanka, like there's very little coverage. You know what I mean? I don't mean it's not like crying for coverage. In part, it's because the government has been so effective in keeping the media out and NGOs out. But obviously, if there was a clamor of NGOs, I mean, I don't know. The government of Sri Lanka is very obstreperous, but Sudan's very obstreperous too. And that yet you go to Darfur and there's a lot of NGOs there. I mean, if they were really obstreperous, they'd be like Sri Lanka with northern Sri Lanka. There'd be nobody there. Nobody in the conflict zone. I mean, literally, Medecins Sans Frontières came here.
And the big question on all of our minds is, next. So the International Criminal Court announced that on March 4th, the sort of a decision will be made on whether or not to issue the warrant for Bashir. Chances are, clearly, they're going to issue the warrant. Whether or not it'll be sort of genocide will be one of the sort of things he's wanted for is another question. But chances are, on March 5th, Bashir will be sort of an internationally wanted criminal. And sort of the question is, what happens on the ground to sort of the humanitarian operation, to the NGOs, to the internationals that are there? Do they get their visas revoked? Are there sort of repercussions visited against them because of the sort of ICC action?
Right.
So this I don't know. This is kind of like something that's been on the top of my mind.
Oh, definitely. It's a big topic over here. Everyone asked, but obviously nobody knows.
And how is it going to affect UNIMID, the peacekeeping operation? As you know, we've gone over this like 100 times. I'm very pro ICC action. But I think it behooves those of us who are very pro ICC action to understand that there might be very, perhaps dire near-term consequences on the ground that would result from this. I guess we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, no, and exactly. I mean, I guess not for the purposes of being contentious, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sudan made UNIMID, if not more difficult, even threw them out. You know what I mean? I mean, I think, and again, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase it, but like, if you have an already sort of like us against the world state, right? When you're then when the president of the state is indicted, and I think he's done terrible things. I just want to say to you, there are a number of world leaders that have done terrible things that you don't see being indicted, which doesn't mean he shouldn't be, but that it's the. I mean, I've been talking actually to a lot. There are a lot of there not a lot, but there's some Sudanese staff members that are very well plugged in over there, and many of them hope that they sort of hope that this indictment will make Sudanese power brokers sort of want to jettison Bashir. I mean, that's sort of the hope.
Yeah, I mean
that's the hope, but I don't know if that's going to happen. And I think again, I think we differ a little bit. Like I like what you I like what you say in the sense of like you have to take this seriously. And I'm not sure that I've seen sort of Ocampo kind of up close and is kind of like not even grandstanding. I just think we'll have to see how it plays out. I'm very much for the principle that like wrongdoers should be brought to justice, right? But you got to like.
Yeah.
I also think. I think to be him, I think that there were several steps to do between going after warlords in the Congo and some relatively low-level Sudanese, and then jumping to a head of state.
Yeah.
That was a big jump, and I guess go for the gusto. I think he thought whatever he thought, but I think it also would have looked better if the court had at least some cases that were not in Africa. I guess we'll go back to that one.
So I don't mean I spent a lot of the last Dialogue talking about this very issue.
No, we don't have to go over that ground. I'll leave it.
I don't know if you know. It was a good one though. It was with a writer for Opinio Juris, who is a close observer of these issues. I wanted to maybe switch gears.
No problem.
I know you've been burning to talk about this, and I confess I haven't read the report, and you are the first person to make me aware of it, but I know you're burning to talk about a new Human Rights Watch report that on DRC.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I'll serve it up to you like that, because I don't.
It's
really
actually
know
it's
much about
I think in connection with and the problem is there have been so many that as the Human Rights Watch brought their their main Congo expert, this woman Annika van Woudenberg, I do want to stop. I think both of us were aware of the work of Alison Deforge, so we should just not say she was like Human Rights Watch's main expert on Rwanda, who perished in that crash in Buffalo. So just I mean, I was thinking in listening to Annika talk, I was like, there are I'm sometimes not a skeptic about Human Rights Watch. Sometimes I think like.